Hello, welcome to an episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today we have of course, another special guest, another Manning author. We have Rich Heimann, who is the author of Sutskever's List. Hello, Rich. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, long day, as we were discussing before. So, as we were kind of talking about before, like you have this book you're writing called Sutskever's List, which I think is quite interesting. Again, I think you know already. People hear the name and they're like, "What is that?" And like, the first thing I saw when I saw it. Sorry, the first thing I thought when I saw it was like, "Is this like an algorithm of some sort or something?" Because most books and most things are named after an algorithm or some kind of method. I guess this is kind of a method, right? The Sutskever's List. Do you mind to kind of talk a little bit about like what is it exactly?
So I guess at its core, it's a reading list. It's a reading list that Ilya Sutskever shared with John Carmack a few years ago. A little bit of background, I guess, on both of those people. John Carmack is I guess, famous computer scientist, software developer. He's responsible for game development like Doom and Wolfenstein and Commander Keen, others, of course. He was a CTO at Oculus for a number of years, and so when he was leaving Oculus, he was being recruited by OpenAI, which of course is an AI company, and at that recruitment dinner, he ran into Ilya Sutskever, who's a notable AI researcher, and he was asking Ilya for some tips, like, "Hey, how do I get started?" He was interested in transitioning from virtual reality to artificial intelligence, and so Ilya gave him this reading list and promised him that the reading list would explain 90% of what's going on in artificial intelligence. And so that reading list has become, it's still, I guess, a little bit of a niche kind of topic online, but it's also created or generated some buzz, and it's got some tailwinds around it. And so, generally speaking, I think there's some, again, like these small small pieces of the internet, but there's some excitement about the reading list, and I guess even its promise. It's sort of the promise that in a pretty like opaque field, and a field that's moving pretty rapidly, that you could understand 90% of what's going on. And I think that's pretty appealing to a lot of people who look at the list, which is pretty small. It includes 27 artifacts. Most of those are academic white papers. There's a couple of books, a couple of web pages, a college class, Stanford AI class on computer vision, but still much smaller than the number of artifacts that are generated by researchers every year.
The list itself, how was it actually leaked out? Because I think people were asking and nobody was really talking about what's actually on the list. No.
Yeah, well, everybody talks about what's on the list, and the list did exist at one point. Obviously, John Carmack has asked about the list many times, but he lost the list. He was working at Meta, I guess, at the time when he received the list, and Meta has a pretty stringent email kind of policy where it purges old emails. And he's even publicly encouraged Ilya to release the list, because according to John, that there's probably a pretty strong appetite for that kind of material. And but at any rate, it's never been publicly released. Carmack lost it. Delia won't share it, and so it is all speculation at this point of what's on the list. A lot of people have again speculated what's on the list. A number of people have like reconstructed likely versions of it. There's an OpenAI insider who leaked a version of it, and that's kind of become maybe like the informal, I guess, authoritative. I know that's somewhat paradoxical, but the like informal authoritative version of it, and that is the version that I'm using in the book. I will add, though, the absence of the actual list, I think, is sort of on trend for Ilya, who's kind of like a recluse. He doesn't talk a lot publicly, but it's also, I think it's simultaneously sort of created this mystique maybe around the list itself, where it's kind of allowed people to speculate on what is on the list. And when they see these reconstructions, they they sort of like weigh in and kind of vote down, I guess, some of the artifacts. And so it's become sort of a fun little game online of like what should the list be. And then like the second order effect is like, well, even with these reconstructed lists, what does it tell us about one of AI's most significant researchers, at least in modern times, which is Ilya. And so people have not only tried to analyze the list itself, but I think try to interpret Ilya's mental model. Like, what are the significance of these papers?
I mean, before we dig in too deep, I'd like to know a little bit more about your background, right? And how you came to come up with this book. Would you study in school? Kind of find out what the hell you are right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so formally, my background is in spatial econometrics. So I was basically doing quantitative geography in my undergrad and graduate work. I worked at sort of like these government corporate research labs, like the Naval Research Lab and DARPA, doing kind of like these large scale computational social science projects. And then while I was at DARPA working on a program, again, kind of this computational social science project, it was pretty successful. And the DARPA leadership was interested in sort of like rolling that over into a new program. So DARPA, for people who aren't familiar, is sort of like the R&D arm of the Pentagon. And so at any rate, the subsequent DARPA program was cybersecurity oriented. So it was network defense. So instead of finding sort of like aberrant behavior in populations, you were looking for aberrant behavior in network traffic. And so, conceptually, the translation was pretty clear from one program to the other. But then that's where I started working more with machine learning, and that was maybe 15 years ago. And I worked in cybersecurity for a number of years. Recently sold a company, and so I and so this breezing over some of the details, of course, but so yeah, so my background is statistics. I've worked a lot in machine learning, both as sort of a practitioner, also kind of like a manager, or I guess executive at large companies. Currently, I'm the state director of artificial intelligence for South Carolina. And the book itself was the result of just tweeting something out, or actually, I think it was on LinkedIn. I posted something about this time last year about Sutskever's list, and a publisher at Manning saw it and liked the idea. And so they approached me and asked me, like, how could something like this be a book? And I gave them ideas of how not to do it. And then they're like, well, you should be the one who should write it. And I wasn't convinced I should. I had written a couple of books before it, but I was also very busy. But their confidence, I guess, in my vision is what galvanized me. And so I started writing about maybe late January, early February last year, and I'm just finishing up the book now. So it should be available next spring. It's actually, in fact, it's currently available, but in MEEP. So MEEP, the publisher is Manning, and MEEP is their early access program. So if you want sort of like a rough proximity or approximation of what the book will ultimately look like, it is available now. But the polished version will be available in spring 2026.
You need to polish quite a lot. I mean, I see you put quite a lot of effort into this already. Looking at the MEEP right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, how do you? I'm not even sure. How do you even like talk about what is, because really it's like, okay, it's called his list. You just publish the list and then you're done, right? I mean, but you do talk a little bit about what is this list, where's it come from, and then you dig kind of a little bit into the lore. I mean, what else do you kind of discuss in it?
Yeah. Well, so at its core, it is a technical analysis of these different artifacts, and the target audience are people who maybe would otherwise have a difficult time interpreting these papers and their significance and how enduring the ideas are today. They're not written for the people who write these papers. Obviously, like that would have a very small market. but not only a small market, it would be somewhat redundant, right? Like, so it's an attempt to do it's a technical analysis the goal of which is to just make the material a little more accessible. However, my vision of the book was not to have this anthology of sorts where like each chapter would be a technical breakdown of a single artifact. And actually, this was Manning's vision of the book. They wanted me to do like there are 27, let's call them papers. They wanted 27 chapters, but I wasn't interested in just like doing a technical breakdown of each paper. What I wanted to do, and hopefully it's reflected in the book, is to not only synthesize these ideas, but to connect them and to show how they're connected and how they've influenced each other. Because like if you look at them chronologically, they kind of do build on each other. And you know, if you're getting into AI over the last few years, you may not appreciate the history of modern AI, which really goes back maybe 15 years, back farther in some regard. And so that's kind of my strategy. Is at its core, it's a technical analysis of the papers, but also how do they connect? How are they? What is their significance today? How enduring are the ideas? But then also trying to connect them to Ilya and sort of using Ilya as a narrative through line, because really like his journey over the last 15 years is roughly the journey of artificial intelligence. And so kind of like interpreting the list through not only his research, but even some of the things that he has said publicly, I think makes the story not just like this technical work, which most Manning books are, but also like this human story, which I just think it makes it a lot more consumable and interesting to the readers. Like I read a lot of these technical books and they're not fun to read, not all of them at least. And so hopefully this is something that readers will be able to pick up and actually enjoy reading while learning about modern artificial intelligence.
I'm curious about this about the book though. Like, what I mean about the book is, I mean like the papers themselves. We had a discussion before we started recording about how these papers are usually filled with so much jargon and a lot of kind of shop talk, I guess you can call it. Can anybody read these papers? Is the list in a specific order? If I start from beginning to end, that I'll be able to kind of pick up all the
No,
shop and
great
everything
question.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So roughly it's in chronological order because I think that makes a lot of sense. It kind of like you start off with kind of these like it would be difficult to start at the end and kind of like work in reverse chronological order. So it starts with AlexNet, which I think was a big moment in computer vision. It was kind of the start of all of this. Actually, a project that Ilya was involved in as well, and it moves on from advances in computer vision to advances in natural language, early architectures, including like RNNs and LSTMs, and then there's an entire chapter dedicated to attention-based neural networks and the creation of transformers, which is followed by scaling. And so there's good flow, chronologically speaking, in that regard. The papers are grouped though thematically, and so like the papers about computer vision are in one chapter, are actually broken out in two chapters. The material on natural language processing, so language modeling, is broken up into two chapters. And so I would say rough chronological order, and they're also constructed thematically. So you're situated, I guess, both temporally and thematically in that regard. As it relates to who the book is for, I think it's for anybody who's interested in artificial intelligence, enthusiasts and skeptics alike. I do a lot of like the narrative analysis of like, hey, like not only trying to like the chronological order I think is important, but also like what was the reaction by the public? What was the reaction by other academics when these papers were released? And so I look at that and so that's looking at the narratives of both, like the excitement around the releases of these technologies, but also the skepticism. And I think that's useful for readers. Just again, it's a little more contextual, it's a little more situational awareness, and so hopefully the reader will like get a sense of the gravity of some of these innovations at the time when they were released, and yeah, hopefully again that just makes it more engaging.
We also did talk about the list, right? In terms of like, things can become basically the list has been pretty solid since it's kind of been decided upon. But we were saying it's possible that actually the list could actually need to be updated or even added on to. Do you think that you'd need to like update your book with another edition when that happens, or do you feel like we're going to be pretty solid where it is right now for some time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think again, part of the appeal of the list is that it promises 90% of what's going on in artificial intelligence. And so that's, I think, again, like that's a very seductive idea because the field is changing so rapidly. So I anticipate that it will persist. I do think the list, it's not immutable. So of course it could change. I think if it does require change, it would be as a consequence of it's not even just, well, maybe Transformers no longer becomes kind of the dominant paradigm in AI. I think in that case, you would probably have to update the book and add a chapter, whatever, new chapter, a couple new chapters. I don't Irrelevant, I think, would require that deep learning somehow becomes an old paradigm. And in that sense, all of this becomes impotent, right? Like none of it matters if there's a new architecture. Then there's a new list and there's a new person who is talking about with the same promise that explains 90% of what's happening in AI, given that paradigm. I am working on a book proposal right now with Manning. Now that I'm really just finishing up. The book is about to go into its final peer review, but I'm done writing. I'll have to do rewrites in January and February, but practically speaking, like the book is written in at least sort of like a pretty mature draft form. Carmack has talked about 40 papers, and the reconstructed lists vary from about 25 to 30, and the version I'm using is 27. And so there's like some people have kind of latched onto that, and that the 40 number could have just been Carmack kind of spitballing a number. It could in fact have only been 27. And but at any rate, people online have kind of latched onto this and like, well, what are the missing papers, the lost papers kind of idea. And so there's even speculation outside of like, well, what is the core reconstructed list? It's like, well, there might be a gap, and then what are those 13 papers? And so I've actually got a book proposal with going out soon to Manning. I've already talked to them about it. They love the idea. But I think next year you might see a second volume of the book, which is the lost papers. And it would include 13 papers. And the 13 papers I'm targeting, I'm not going to talk about them now, but they're all things that Ilya has discussed in like presentations or interviews. And so it's still grounded in Ilya. And I do that again just so we could try to maybe analyze his world model and why he thinks these things are significant. But yeah, I think you'll see another version of this book next year.
Now, I'm kind of curious about yourself, right? After going through the list, I'm sure you've read basically all the papers, probably even more than what's on the list. Do you feel that the list could be improved, or do you feel that it should be expanded based on your knowledge so far?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a better version of the list. Like some of the papers are barely cited. Some of them are obsolete. Like that is like they kind of introduce an idea that was replaced by a much better idea. And in fact, like I'm thinking one paper specifically where if we accept that it was a paper that Ilya promoted, he has explicitly come out in recent interviews and said, "Oh, like that was a bad idea. We thought it was a good idea at the moment, but it's actually a bad idea." However, I think these papers, like there might be an argument made where like an imperfect list is a little more interesting than like a perfect list. You could certainly go back over the last 10 or 15 years and just like sort by citations and take those 15 papers. But I'm not convinced that's more interesting. Like in retrospect, that would probably be more accurate of like, hey, these papers have been more important to the field. But it's Sutskever's list, and so part of this is it's not necessarily the most important papers over the last 15 years, though most of these papers have had a high impact. AlexNet, ResNet, the introduction of attention, ultimately the attention is all you need, scaling laws paper. Like there are some canonical papers in there that are, I guess, unambiguously like important to the field. But these like one-offs that might give you some insight into like Ilya's worldview, I think, again, makes the book a little messier, but also a little more interesting in talking about, well, these were good ideas in 2016, but they're not great ideas anymore, and this is why. And so, you almost get this scenario where you're able to sample off your, like you're not just sampling off your dependent variable, like the most significant papers. You're kind of looking at like, oh, well, in 2016, we thought this was so clever and it was dog shit, like, but it explains to people who weren't there in 2016 why people were excited about it and why in subsequent years people cooled off a little bit to some of these ideas. And anyway, that hopefully that makes it a little more interesting.
Now, do you ever feel that like maybe some of the stuff just could be people playing? I mean, sometimes people like to troll, right, and just kind of throw some hints. Like, do you think some people are kind of reading too much into certain things? A little bit like what's, I forgot the name of that group, the anonymous or anonymous. What's the name of the group from the right?
Yeah.
I can't remember now. Yeah,
QAnon.
yeah,
maybe?
like QAnon stuff. Just like, oh, did you see that? He put his he put his cup like this. That means it's this paper. Or do you think this? Or do you think that there must be some people that really read too much into it? Have you seen some pretty crazy stories that you're like, no way, this could be a hint that this is one of the papers?
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the papers, one of the reasons why I picked the version of the list that I picked is because, it wasn't a perfect list. And almost like the imperfections added, again, a little bit of charm to it. Like if it had just been like sort descending by citation, I would have, that's not interesting to me. But even those fringe papers, I think were interesting and plausible, and Ilya has almost in every case has mentioned these research papers. So no, I don't think there's a QAnon aspect to it. I don't think there are any red, false flags, I guess is maybe a better way to frame it. And they're not all Ilya's papers too, which I think is also interesting. Like you could imagine a different scenario where it's just like, I want to understand Ilya entirely and I don't care about modern artificial intelligence. And in that case, it's just, let's just analyze the 30 most significant papers that Ilya's written. And he has like 800,000 citations. I mean, that would be an interesting book, but it may not tell you everything you need to know about modern AI. And so, the middle ground, I think, is kind of like where the list is today, where it's not like everything that you need. Like it's not the most impactful things of modern AI, and it's not the most impactful research that Ilya does. It's kind of the overlap between those two circles. Think of it maybe as a Venn diagram, and you kind of get the sense of like what has happened in modern AI and what is Ilya's worldview, and so hopefully you get both.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it'd just be his work that he would be referencing if he references his work at all. I don't know the guy, but I'm just thinking to myself like, A few
Yeah.
probably come from him. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't also be surprised if none of them came from him. I mean, I don't know what kind of work he does, but you know, he just people. I mean, work just builds upon itself, right? So I'm not so
Yeah.
sure what kind of work he's committed to. So he could be way up high up there. That doesn't really matter. You got to still get the fundamentals in there before you start to understand what he's worked on. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I don't have any more questions about this topic. I feel like it's. I mean, it's his list, and we talked about kind of where it came from. We talked about you. We talked about what some addendum you have coming up that sounds interesting. Um, did we cover anything? Because I feel like if we keep talking about it, we might actually people don't want to like pick up the book now, other than just to get the list, and they can probably find the list themselves.
No, this has been good. No, I really appreciate your time, and the book is available for purchase. So I'd encourage people who are interested in learning a little bit more about modern AI and sort of the overlap with Ilya Sutskever to check it out.
Yeah. So we did talk about this before the show too. I just wanted to kind of put this out there because I don't think we exactly covered this question. As I said over here, there's quite a lot of like paper reading clubs. I'm curious that if I went through the list, went through your book, would I be able to like come to these paper reading clubs and actually be able to kind of catch up and be able to understand what's going on, or do you think that
Yeah.
it's not related?
Yeah, that's really interesting question. I hope so. Yeah, like one of the things I and one of you anytime you work with a publisher, like man, there's always tension, and I think the tension is good. Like Manny wanted an anthology and I didn't want an anthology, but both of us had to create arguments of why like one was better than the other. And but one of the other touch points that has caused some debate, not exactly contention, but debate, is the use of jargon. And I like you obviously need to explain the jargon, but I didn't want to make it so like a lot of these pop science AI books, like they're accessible and people kind of get the gist of like what has happened or what is happening, whatever the topic of the book is. But like they dumb it down, sort of like in air quotes, they dumb it down so much that that person could never go into the lion's den, for example, like pick up a paper and understand any of it because it is still written in jargon, and AI researchers are still going to talk in jargon. And so like I try to use the most important jargon with explanation so that if you are an AI engineer, you're going to you have to understand these terms and what they mean and their significance. And so I didn't want to make it so accessible to like a mainstream audience that I would lose the practitioner or the engineer. And so yeah, maybe my hope is that you could read the book and you could go into a reading club and you could be like, oh yeah, like I've heard that term before, and I think I remember what it means.
Perfect. I mean, I think this is something I might want to actually dig into myself. I've been trying to get more and more into AI, so I've been tempted to go to these paper clubs, but I feel way way out of my league just even reading like the description and kind of trying to catch up with what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah,
So
I
I've
get
kind of
it.
stayed out of it. Yeah, again, so again, the book is called Sutskever's List. Did I say that right? I was expecting to get that
You
wrong.
got it.
Wow, that
Yeah.
was first try. And of course, Rich Heimann, the author of the book. We're gonna have a link to the book. I think we have a nice discount thanks to Manning, so we'll be able to pick that up. Definitely, if you're interested in this list, pick up the book from Manning directly. Don't pick it up from Bezos. We don't need him buying yet another trip to the moon or wherever the heck he's gonna go this time around. Just get some more money into the pocket of Rich so he can work on his next addendum to the list.
I appreciate it.
Rich, again, thanks for coming on, and
Yeah,
yeah, maybe we'll have you on for the addendum. It sounds interesting.
I
So
love
now I have to
that.
start getting onto this paper list. Now, sorry, one last question. If I started reading this list now, would I be able to finish in time by the time you have your addendum out? I mean, is it really like a long list? Because these papers
It,
can be quite long, right?
yeah, I mean, the book is going to be over 90,000 words. I'm really pushing Manning to do an Audible version.
Mm,
So I love Audible. It's because I cover very little notation, and so I think it would be good in Audible form, and you could probably listen on 2x speed and get through it in you know a weekend.
That's a very big crash course. It sounds like one of those like MBAs, 4 years of education. You just get it all in just 8 hours, right? Okay. Again, thanks for coming on. And like I said, I'm more than happy to have you on for the next version if they pick it up. It sounds pretty
I love
interesting to
that.
see.
Thanks, Al. Cheers.